I want to talk about
Mm.
a little bit about the 2024 election with you.
Yeah.
Back in May, you published a piece for the New Republic asking readers to imagine a world in which Trump is elected for a second term. And you painted this very vivid image of how Trump could silence his critics, including in the press. And this
Yeah.
is something that's been a recurring topic on this show. Almost everyone I've spoken to is raising alarms about what a
I've been
second
hearing.
term would mean for journalists. And I'm
Yes.
naturally disposed to being, I think, a bit more sanguine than others. And so I'm always a little bit skeptical when I hear anything close to alarmism. Brian, how alarmed should I really be about the potential of a second Trump term when it comes to his treatment of the press?
Well, Aidan, you look so privileged in your library there. You have a beautiful globe behind you, all of
Great
your
books.
books. It looks very rich. You look very comfortable. Maybe
I am.
maybe you don't have to worry, okay? I kid. I do think you should worry.
Okay.
Here actually worry is the wrong word. I think what we should all do is a kind of a thought experiment, a thought exercise, right? What could happen? And it doesn't mean necessarily all negative things, but I think it's smart to be going into this election season with eyes wide open about the possibilities. And I say that because I know that that's what some editors and publishers and owners are doing. I've talked with a couple of media CEOs who are doing this exercise, and they're sitting down and thinking through, okay, what are the levers that Trump could use? What buttons could he push to punish my organization? How could he use the government against my news outlet? And it doesn't mean he's going to do it. Doesn't mean we don't want to give him any ideas about how. But let's go into 2025 with a vivid idea. So, for example, some obvious ones would be IRS audits and government regulations, the use of the FCC in new ways to control license holders. But then there are, of course, the more subtle ways that I think are more corrosive and more dangerous. Think about how Trump tried to target Amazon because Bezos owned the Washington Post, and because Trump didn't like what the Post was reporting about him. If you'll recall 5 years ago, Trump would call it the Bezos Washington Post. He was trying to, or the Amazon Washington Post. He was trying to punish the Amazon business by denying government contracts in order and affecting the post office and all that sort of stuff in order to punish the Washington Post. Now, he was not very effective at doing so in his first term, but we know that there was also meddling. There's the strong reporting indicates there was meddling with CNN, with the owner of CNN when AT&T was trying to buy Time Warner. That's another episode that we can look to from the past as a blueprint for the future. So, not to worry, but to be aware of the possibilities, I think is smart. And in my piece of the New Republic, I took it a few steps further and imagined a very destructive scenario where an act of violence or an act of protest could be used to punish the press. So, here's what I imagined, and you tell me if it seems impossible. Let's say some protesters, disrupt Inauguration Day. And let's say that Trump forces come out and say, the protesters were getting help from the press. The press is aiding and abetting the protesters. They're anti-American. They're anti-Trump. They're trying to kill Trump. That rhetoric is not far off from what we hear today. There's already in MAGA world this narrative that Trump's going to be assassinated by the deep state because they just can't stand the thought of a second Trump term.
Marjorie Taylor Greene said yesterday that Biden and the debate moderators want to assassinate Trump.
I hadn't even seen that headline because I live in reality.
Tucker Carlson repeatedly floats that Trump is going to be assassinated by Election Day.
That I think is really dangerous. I think it's really dangerous to push that before Election Day, because then after an inauguration, it makes it easy for the security state to take drastic action in the name of protecting the president. Imagine a world where Trump doesn't travel with the press. Imagine a world where he flies out of Andrews Air Force Base and journalists are arrested for trying to see where his plane's going. This is not far-fetched to imagine a world where couple journalists get beat up at a rally, and then editors say, don't go to those rallies. Imagine a world where one journalist gets shot by a border officer and we don't know what happened and we don't know why, and it's all very murky. But just that kind of spasm of violence could be enough to cause newsrooms to pull back for their own protection. It's not to say every journalist would pull back. It's not to say everybody would fall in line. But I do think there's a world where perceived threats or security risks could be weaponized in order to retaliate against the press. And what I fear most, and what I was trying to refer to in this piece, The New Republic, is the self-censorship and the what's the right phrase for it? And like, people will pull back on their own accord to protect themselves. Yes, and that is very much what we see in more autocratic states. When we talk about democratic backsliding, it doesn't happen all at once, doesn't happen on one day, doesn't happen all in the same direction, but it happens bit by bit as people decide to pull back, lay low. I mean, look, between I'm about to say between us, but we're on a podcast, so I sound like an idiot. Between us, I have had fellow journalists say to me, in 2025, if Trump's reelected, I might just lay low for a while. Like, I might just not be writing as much. I might not be reporting on politics. I might try to find a new beat or a new job or go into a new industry. I have had people whose names make these comments to me. So I do think this is a real fear. It's something really worth grappling with.
And, one of the things that I was thinking about the other day that's a little bit alarming to me is obviously guardrails are what keeps something like a Trump presidency from going off the rails. And one of the major guardrails is the media. And right. I was heartened when the Dominion defamation case hit Fox News hard and hit Newsmax hard and hit all these networks and made it clear that there are consequences for embracing lies about the 2020 election. My fear is now that, and we've seen the coverage on Fox News in particular over the last couple of years, that Fox News has become very good at just making sure that they don't defame private companies or defame people. But they still are more than happy to indulge in election denialism or election fraud conspiracy theories. And I fear that that's going to be something that's going to get turbocharged by the time we get to the 2024 election. And let's say either Trump loses and you have Fox News giving fuel to election lies that he's going to undoubtedly spread, or Trump wins and you have a second Trump presidency where some of his behavior is also excused by Fox. Is that something that concerns you, or do you think that the network has possibly learned its lesson from the 2020 fiasco?
Fox learning a lesson. Those are interesting words to put in the same sentence. I think the lesson is very narrow. As you just said, the very narrow lesson is not to defame certain companies that have a high propensity to sue. But more broadly, they are already laying the groundwork for another insurrection. They're already laying the groundwork for any Biden victory to be considered delegitimate, for any Trump loss to be considered a rigged plot. It's already happening. It's happening in plain sight. And in that way, they're doing a disservice to their audience. Democrats tend to be the stressed out, anxious ones who assume they're always going to lose. I understand that a lot of Democrats lose a lot of sleep for that reason. But that's actually a healthier way to be than the kind of Fox News Republican narrative, which is, we're winning, we're ahead, we're going to crush the evil liberals, we're going to make them cry again. Because we've seen time and time again, when Republicans come up short, as in 2022, when the red wave doesn't materialize, Fox viewers are confused. They're hurting. What actually happens is they've been misled by their favorite shows. But instead of blaming their favorite shows, they blame other people or other forces. They come up with conspiracy theories. They say it was rigged. They blame blah, blah, blah. They blame big cities with Democrat voters. We've seen this over and over again. And I do think we're going to see it again this fall. But let me flip around, be the counter argument to myself. There's also a world where Trump loses and most people just let out a giant, not a sigh of relief, but just an exhale. This country desperately wants to exhale and have a break from all this hate and division. And I don't put that all on Trump. I just think in general, this is a country that's fatigued, that doesn't want to deal with this noise as much. And I do wonder if there's a world in which, rather than the damaging and frightening vision that I portrayed, even in the event of a Trump win, maybe things are much more moderated. Maybe the press is empowered and not threatened by a second Trump term. Maybe we're right back to 2017 all over again.